Just off the northerly coast of Perth in southwestern Australia sits what is left of one of the world's most infamous shipwrecks. What remains of the ship today is barely visible below the waves, and to most people, the sight of this wreck would be somewhat underwhelming. However, the haunting and often tragic past of this once historic vessel more than make up for in reputation what she now lacks in stature. This is the story of Australia's most haunted, cursed shipwreck, the SS Alkimos. A former World War II Liberty ship produced in Baltimore as the George M. Shriver in 1943. Her construction was said to be a controversial one. It is believed that during her rushed construction, several welders were accidentally sealed into a section of the hull. The following day, realizing what had happened, rescuers were too late. In the dark, hot, airless confines, the men had suffocated. Whilst at sea, now sailing under the name Viggo Hanstein, her crew felt uneasy in parts of the ship, saying they felt watched and saw figures moving in the shadows. The lights would flicker and the engine often died. Others said they would smell food cooking or hear voices calling from empty corridors. Enhancing her cursed reputation further, in the late summer of 1944, whilst delivering a cargo of US Army gliders at Naples in Italy, a 28-year-old Canadian wireless operator named Maud Elizabeth Steen was shot dead by a Norwegian crewman who then turned the gun on himself. Steen had been a skilled member of the Hanstein's crew for just a few weeks, having trained in Canada since 1942. Few Canadian women served at sea during the war, but Steen was determined to do her part, making her loss all the more unjust and tragic. Investigators could uncover no motive for the murder, and efforts were even made to disguise the crime as being the result of enemy action before the truth eventually came out. Maud would eventually be laid to rest at the Allied War Cemetery in Florence. For the remainder of the war, the ship ferried US troops and German POWs across the Atlantic and took part in numerous convoys. Post-war, from 1946, she will be sold on repeatedly and had several, mainly Greek, owners, though one Costa Rican owner would rename her Alkimos before she returned to Greek ownership. Fate would not be kind to the Alkimos, and in 1963, whilst on a voyage close to the coast of Australia's Northern Territories, she struck a submerged reef and was badly damaged. Initially sent to Fremantle for emergency repairs, she was later to be towed out by tugboat from Fremantle to Hong Kong for more extensive attention. However, early into the voyage, the tow line gave way and the Alkimos was beached by the waves. Then, in 1964, the vessel was refloated and a second attempt made to tow her. Unfortunately, maritime authorities unexpectedly seized the new tug known as the Pacific Star and abandoned the Alkimos for the time being. That was until her anchor chain snapped several weeks later and heavy seas dashed the hapless ship against rocks close to the Perth shore. She was now considered too costly to refloat and repair, and so her ballast tanks and cargo bays were flooded to keep her firmly in place on the seabed until she could be dismantled by salvage crews. This, however, was not to be. Whilst the doomed vessel waited to be scrapped, caretakers, who were placed on board alone, found the ship to be far from empty. One caretaker in 1964 claimed to have had a run-in with a bright white figure emerging from the cargo hold. He also heard the tapping of Morse code coming from the radio room, once the domain of the ill-fated Maud Steen, despite it having been sealed up. A female caretaker who was pregnant at the time said she was pushed down some stairs, causing her to be evacuated from the Alkimos. When salvagers eventually arrived, almost immediately after boarding, the crews found themselves forced to abandon ship as a mysterious fire erupted on board. In fact, it's said that 12 attempts by salvagers to work on the ship were thwarted by strange fires breaking out every time they boarded, forcing them to eventually admit defeat and once again abandon the Alkimos. One last try by salvage diver Jack Wong Soo to shore up the wreck failed when Jack and several teammates reported hearing footsteps coming from within submerged parts of the ship. According to the Australian Geographic website, Jack, who didn't believe in the curse of the Alkimos, became seriously ill after returning from the ship and spent almost a year in hospital. During this time, Jack's wife would die in a car crash, and the fiancé of another dive team member would also die, this time in a plane crash. Another team member's marriage would fall apart, and Jack's attitude towards the cursed ship changed. Perhaps one of the strangest stories revolves around the Australian swimmer Herbert Voigt. Voigt, often known as Mr. Sharkbait, had been attempting a popular swimming route across the channel between Cottesloe Shore and Rottnest Island when he vanished in 1969. The area is known to have sharks and even enormous saltwater crocodiles. However, it is said that his skull would later be found in the engine room of the decrepit old ship, though this is highly disputed. Slowly but surely, the SS Alkimos has almost completely disintegrated into the clear blue seas of the Perth coast, and the seaside town of Alkimos, so named after the stricken vessel. Left behind now are just a few hunks of metal and the ghostly bow just beneath the surface, as well as a haunting legacy of phantom sailors seen on a crumbling deck, strange deaths and disappearances. Yet, even today, the draw of the cursed wreck still attracts swimmers, divers and beachgoers who try to catch a final glimpse of something out there before the sea claims the Alkimos and a curse forever.